He betrayed her with her best friend. 6 years later, he couldn't face what she'd become. Vanessa Cole did not hesitate. She did not look guilty, did not flinch, did not pull the sheet any higher when the bedroom door swung open. She simply turned her head toward the sound. And the first thing she said to the woman who had been her best friend for 11 years was not an apology. It was Amara. This isn't what you think. Amara Ellison stood in the doorway with 2 cups of specialty coffee going cold in her hands and a positive pregnancy test still sitting in her purse, the secret she had carried for 10 days. The news she had driven across the city at noon just to share with the man she was supposed to marry in 4 months. Derek Holloway was in their bed. Vanessa Cole was beside him. And Amara's entire future was dismantling itself quietly, the way a building collapses from the inside before anyone outside hears a sound. If you have ever trusted someone completely, and I mean completely, with your plans and your money and your unborn child, then you already know what Amara felt in that doorway. Not rage, not tears, just the terrible, irreversible clarity of finally understanding what kind of people you have been loving. If you're new here, subscribe now and follow this story all the way to the end, because what Amara builds from this moment will shock you. And drop a comment telling me what city or country you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The coffee shop where Amara had stopped on her way home was called Meridian Roasters, a narrow place tucked between a dry cleaner and a print shop on Eastlake Avenue. She had been a regular there for 2 years. The barista, a thin young man named Cole, with a nose ring and a perpetual ink stain on his left wrist, knew her order without asking. Single origin pour-over for her, oat milk latte with 1 pump of vanilla for Derek. She had not needed to be home at all that afternoon. The client meeting in Portland had been canceled that morning. A water pipe had burst in the hotel's conference wing, flooding 3 floors, and the hospitality group had pushed everything to the following week. Amara had been on the light rail back to Seattle by 11, texting Derek that she was coming home early, hoping to catch him between calls so they could have a proper lunch together for the first time in 3 weeks. He had read the message. He had not replied. She had assumed he was in a meeting. Derek ran a small but genuinely profitable event coordination business, and he kept irregular hours. It was one of the things she had loved about him early on, that he was always doing something, always moving, always building. He had been the one who pushed her to leave the regional hotel chain where she had spent 6 years managing event contracts and go independent. "You're too good to be someone else's employee," he had told her 2 years into their relationship. "You should be building your own name." She had listened. She had built Ellison Hospitality Consulting from a single laptop and a rented desk at a co-working space in Capitol Hill. By the time Derek proposed, she had 4 recurring clients and was billing more per month than she ever had on salary. She had believed they were building the same thing. She had been wrong about that too. The door to their apartment was unlocked. That should have registered as unusual. Derek was meticulous about locking it, almost compulsively so, a habit left over from growing up in a neighborhood where unlocked doors meant something different than convenience. But Amara had 2 cups of coffee in her hands and her laptop bag on her shoulder, and her mind already moving ahead to the conversation she wanted to have. The news she had been holding for 10 days, like a stone in her chest, heavy and warm and terrifying. She pushed the door open with her hip. She set the coffees on the entryway table. She heard something. Later, she would not be able to describe it precisely. Not a voice, not a sound she could name. More like a shift in the apartment's atmosphere. The way a room feels different when there are more people in it than you expected. Her body understood before her mind did. Her hand stopped on the strap of her bag. Her breathing slowed. She walked down the hallway. She opened the bedroom door, and there they were. Vanessa spoke first. "Amara, this isn't what you think." The sentence was so inadequate for the moment that it almost seemed cruel. Amara looked at her, really looked at her, taking in the way Vanessa's hair was loose across the pillow, the way Derek's hand was still on her arm, the way neither of them had moved toward the door or toward their clothes or toward any gesture of genuine remorse, and something inside Amara went very, very still. Derek finally sat up. "Amara, don't." Her voice came out flat. Not loud, not broken. Just flat, like a door closing on empty air. "Both of you. Get out, baby. Do not call me that." She stepped back from the doorway. "You have 20 minutes. When I come back into this room, I need you both gone." She walked back down the hallway. She picked up the coffee cups from the entryway table. She sat down on the living room couch, held both cups in her lap, and looked at the framed photograph on the shelf. Across from her and Derek at the Oregon coast 2 summers ago, both of them windburned and laughing. His arm around her shoulders, her face turned toward him, like he was something worth looking at. She sat there and did not move until she heard the bedroom door open, heard Vanessa's footsteps in the hallway, heard the careful, terrible silence as Vanessa passed through the living room without stopping, without speaking, without looking at her. The apartment door opened and closed. Then Derek appeared in the hallway. He was dressed. Barely. Jeans, no belt, a shirt he hadn't fully buttoned. His face had the look of a man who had rehearsed several different versions of this moment and could not decide which one to perform. Amara, please. She set one of the coffee cups down on the end table. Oat milk latte. That's yours, she said. It's getting cold. He stared at it like it was something he didn't recognize. How long, she said. Not a question. A door she was opening because she needed to know what was on the other side of it, not because she expected the answer to change anything. Derek looked at the floor. 4 months. The number landed in her chest like something physical. 4 months. She had been carrying his engagement ring for 14 months. She had been carrying his child for 10 days. He had been carrying this for 4 months and had chosen every single morning for 4 months to keep choosing it. Was it the first time? She asked. He didn't answer. Derek. No, he said quietly. She nodded. She stood up from the couch. She walked to the window and stood with her back to him for a moment, looking out at the street, at a woman walking a dog, at a bus pulling away from the corner, at the ordinary, continuing world that did not care at all about what was happening in this apartment. I need you to leave, she said. Can we? Now. She turned around. Please. He looked at her for a long moment. She could see him wanting to say something, to explain, to apologize, to reach for her, to do any one of the things that would have made this about his feelings instead of hers. She could see him stop himself. Maybe he saw something in her face that told him it was already too late for all of that. He picked up the coffee cup. He left it on the table. He walked out. The door closed. Amara stood in her living room for a long time after that. The apartment was completely quiet. She could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen, the distant sound of traffic, someone's television on the floor above. She reached into her purse. She found the small foil packet she had been carrying for 10 days, the one she had stopped at the pharmacy to pick up, the confirmation of the thing she had been holding in her body like a secret. She wasn't ready to say out loud. She held it in her palm and looked at it. Then she put it back in her purse. She sat down on the couch. She looked at the photograph on the shelf, her and Derek at the Oregon coast, 2 summers ago, both of them laughing, and she did not cry. She simply sat there and let herself understand, fully and completely, what had just happened to her future. She did not tell anyone about the pregnancy. Not her mother, in Atlanta, who would have cried on the phone and offered to fly up and made everything both better and significantly more complicated. Not her friend Dija, who would have driven over that same night with wine and fury and the kind of ferocious loyalty that helps enormously in the short term and solves nothing in the long term. Not her therapist, whom she had an appointment with the following Thursday, and who would absolutely find out eventually. She did not tell Derek. That decision was made in the hours after he left, quietly and without drama, while she sat on the couch in a silent apartment and looked at the photograph on the shelf. It was not a decision born of rage, though there was rage in it somewhere, deep and banked and running slow. It was something more deliberate than that, more final. If Derek had been a different man, if he had been the man she thought she was marrying, this would have been his child to know about. But Derek had not been that man. He had been someone else entirely, someone who had looked at her every day for 4 months, and smiled and kissed her, and asked how her meetings went and spoken about their future, in the easy, comfortable language of a man who had already decided to blow that future apart. He just hadn't gotten around to telling her yet. She was not going to hand him the most important piece of her life. She removed the engagement ring 3 hours after he left, placed it on the kitchen counter, stood there, looking at it for a moment, like it was an object she was trying to remember the purpose of. Then she went to bed. She slept for 6 hours without dreaming. The weeks that followed were not the kind of blunt weeks that make for clean storytelling. There was no single dramatic confrontation, no explosive scene that could stand alone as the moment everything turned. There was instead a series of smaller, grinding decisions made under the pressure of a life that no longer had the shape she had expected. She found an attorney within the week, a referral from Deeja's cousin, a woman named Patricia who specialized in exactly this kind of financial untangling. The joint business account she and Derek had opened 18 months earlier to manage. Shared overhead was the immediate priority. It held a significant portion of her client retainer payments. She had put more into it than he had, though that had never felt important while they were building something together. Felt important now. Patricia walked her through the options clearly and without sentimentality, which was exactly what Amara needed. By the end of the second week, the account was separated. By the end of the third week, she had signed a lease on a modest one-bedroom in Beacon Hill, 12 minutes from Capitol Hill, on the second floor of a building managed by a quiet, older man who asked no questions and maintained the radiators. Derek called 4 times during that period. She did not answer. He texted twice. She did not reply. He sent a letter handwritten, 3 pages, the kind of letter that required significant emotional effort and that she recognized, even in her current state, as genuinely felt. She read it once. She put it in the kitchen drawer under the takeout menus. She never read it again. Vanessa did not contact her at all. That absence somehow was worse. She told her mother about the pregnancy at 14 weeks. After the first trimester screening came back and the numbers were good, her mother cried as expected. She asked about Derek as expected. Amara told her, simply, that Derek was not part of the picture and that she needed her mother to accept that without pushing. Her mother was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Are you going to be okay?" And Amara said, "Yes. I just need to figure out what okay looks like now." It was the most honest thing she had said to anyone in 2 months. The seats. The pregnancy was difficult in the specific way that pregnancies are difficult when you are doing them without a partner, and while simultaneously rebuilding your professional life and financial footing. She lost one client in the 4th month, a boutique hotel group that had been considering her for a long-term contract, but had delayed the decision for reasons that may or may not have been related to her situation. She picked up 2 smaller clients to partially offset the loss. She worked from her apartment, from coffee shops, from the desk of a co-working space. She rejoined because the isolation was beginning to wear on her in ways she could feel in her body. She did not slow down. She also did not let herself pretend she was fine when she wasn't. The loneliness was real. The financial strain was real. The moments at 2 in the morning when she lay awake in the Beacon Hill apartment, listening to the radiator knock and thinking about all the ways this had not been the plan, those were real too. She did not dismiss them. She sat with them, the way Patricia had taught her to think about uncomfortable legal realities, clearly, without flinching, until you understood exactly what you were dealing with. Micah Ellison arrived 6 weeks early on a Thursday morning in late November, weighing 4 pounds and 11 ounces, with his mother's nose and a pair of lungs that, despite everything, had plenty to say about being in the world. He spent 17 days in the NICU. Amara spent 17 days in a chair beside his incubator, working on her laptop when he was stable, holding his hand through the incubator port when he was not, eating vending machine sandwiches and accepting coffee from nurses she had learned by name. She was exhausted in a way she had never been exhausted before. Not just physically, though that was significant, but structurally, as if the scaffolding of everything she had assumed about her life had been removed piece by piece, and she was now upright through some combination of muscle, memory, and stubbornness, not entirely sure which was doing more of the work. On day 11, when Micah's oxygen levels finally stabilized and the lead nurse told her he was going to be fine, Amara sat in the parking garage and cried for the first time since the afternoon she had opened that bedroom door. She gave herself 20 minutes. Then she went back inside. Micah came home in December. He was small and difficult and needed more from her than she had ever needed to give anyone, and she gave it without condition. Her mother came up from Atlanta for 6 weeks and was, in the ways that mattered most, exactly what Amara needed. Her mother did not say, "I told you so." Her mother did not bring up Derek. Her mother cooked and held Micah when he was inconsolable at 3 in the morning and sat with Amara at the kitchen table drinking tea and not saying very much at all, which was, it turned out, the most useful thing anyone had done for her in months. When her mother left, the apartment was very quiet again. Amara sat at the kitchen table with Micah in a carrier on her chest, laptop open in front of her, a cold cup of tea at her elbow, a spreadsheet on her screen that she had been staring at for 40 minutes without processing. The spreadsheet was a business plan. Not her consulting business, though. That was worse. Barely on the smaller client she had held together through the pregnancy. Something else. Something she and Derek had talked about once, early in their relationship before the talking became planning, and the planning became the thing she was no longer allowed to associate with him. Faye. A small, specific, intentional cafe. The kind of place where the coffee was taken seriously and the light was good, and people came back not because they had to, because it felt like somewhere worth returning to. She had the concept. She had the business background. She had, after years of hospitality consulting, a fairly clear-eyed understanding of what made small food businesses survive and what made them fail. What she did not have was money, or a partner, or any sensible reason to believe. This was the right moment for a venture like this. She looked at Micah, asleep against her chest, his small face slack with the particular piece of new sleep, his breath coming in the soft, even rhythm she had learned to read like a language. She looked back at the spreadsheet. She began to type. Took her 2 more years. 2 years of consulting during the day and researching cafe economics at night, of applying for small business loans and being declined, and applying again with stronger documentation and a more detailed plan, saving with an aggression that left her social life nearly non-existent, of watching Micah grow from an infant who needed everything from her to a toddler, who had opinions about his socks and could say her name in a way that made the whole grinding enterprise feel like it had a point. She found the space in Pioneer Square on a Tuesday afternoon in early spring, in a building that had housed 3 different businesses in the past decade and still smelled faintly of the spice shop that had occupied it most recently. The landlord was a second-generation Vietnamese-American woman named Helen, who drove a hard but fair bargain, and who told Amara at the end of their 3rd meeting that she liked the plan, and she liked that Amara had brought documentation to every single meeting without being asked. Most people, Helen said, bring enthusiasm. You brought spreadsheets. I have enthusiasm too, Amara said. I just know enthusiasm doesn't pay the build-out. Helen smiled and signed the lease. Amara named it Juniper Ash. She chose the name because juniper was one of the first plants to grow back after a fire moves through an area. She chose it because she liked what that meant. The cafe opened on a Wednesday morning in March. Amara woke at 4, got Micah ready, and dropped him with her downstairs neighbor, drove to Pioneer Square, unlocked the door, turned on the lights, and stood alone in the space she had spent 2 years working toward. Her hands were shaking slightly. The coffee she brewed for herself that first morning was slightly over-extracted. She had rushed the bloom step, which she would not have done if she hadn't been nervous, and it tasted bitter at the finish. She drank it anyway. The first customer came in at 6:47. By noon, she had served 41 people. By closing, she had served 93. She sat in the empty cafe that first evening after she locked the door, looked around at the space that was hers, and felt something she had not felt in a long time. Not happiness exactly. Not yet. Something more tenuous than that. More like the first indication that a direction was correct. The way a headache begins to ease before it's actually gone. The way you can feel a tide turning before the waterline visibly moves. She was tired down to her bones. She had a mountain left to climb. But she had started. And for the first time since she had stood in a bedroom doorway, holding 2 cups of coffee that were going cold, she understood that starting was the only thing that had ever been in her control to. The first year nearly broke her 3 separate times. Not once. Not in a single dramatic collapse that she could point to later and say there, that was the moment I almost quit. It happened in increments, the way structural damage works. Small fractures accumulating in the foundation until one morning you look at the wall and realize the crack that used to be hairline has widened enough to slide your finger into. First near break came in August, 4 months after opening. The espresso machine, a commercial unit she had bought, refurbished from a restaurant liquidation sale, inspected twice, serviced once before opening seized up on a Friday morning at 7:43, which was the single worst time for a cafe in Pioneer Square to lose its espresso machine. Friday mornings were her highest traffic window. The line had already formed outside the door. She had 3 contractors from the architectural firm, 2 blocks over, who came in every Friday without fail, always ordered doubles, always tipped well, always looked mildly put out if their drinks weren't ready within 4 minutes of ordering. She came out from behind the counter and told the line personally that she was having an equipment issue and would be operating on pour-over and batch brew only for the morning. She offered a discount. She apologized without groveling, which was a distinction she was careful about. Most people were understanding. 2 people left without ordering. One man heavyset, in a fleece vest she associated with middle management in the technology sector, made a comment under his breath that she heard clearly and chose not to respond to. She called the equipment repair service at 7:51. They told her the earliest they could come was Monday. She said, "I need someone here today." The dispatcher said, "We don't have availability today. I understand that. I'm telling you I need someone here today. What does that cost?" There was a pause. The dispatcher named a number that was significantly higher than the standard service call. Amara said, "Fine, what time?" The technician arrived at noon. The repair took 2 hours and cost her more than she had budgeted for 3 months of equipment maintenance. She watched the number leave her business account and felt it in her back teeth. She did not tell anyone. She worked the rest of the afternoon on pour-over, kept the line moving, made up about 60% of the morning's projected revenue by close. That night she sat at the kitchen table in the Beacon Hill apartment while Micah slept, opened her laptop, looked at her cash flow projection, and adjusted 3 line items. Then she closed the laptop, washed her face, and went to bed. She did not let herself think about how close the margins were. If she thought about it too hard, she would not sleep. If she did not sleep, she could not function. If she could not function, everything she had built collapsed. It was that simple, and it was that brutal, and she had learned to manage it the way you manage a chronic condition, not by curing it, but by developing the specific discipline required to live alongside it without letting it run your life. The second near break came in November, just before Micah's 2nd birthday. Her part-time barista, a young woman named Sue, who had been with her since month 2, and who was genuinely talented and reliable in the way that good early employees of small businesses often gave 2 weeks' notice on a Monday morning. She had been accepted into a graduate program in Portland. She was sorry. She had loved working there. She hoped Amara understood. Amara told her she was proud of her and that the reference letter would be ready within the week. Then she went into the back, stood at the small utility sink, ran cold water over her wrists for 30 seconds, and allowed herself exactly 1 minute of private panic before she walked back out to manage the mid-morning rush alone. Finding and training a replacement took 6 weeks. During those 6 weeks, she worked open to close 6 days a week and took Sunday afternoons off to be with Micah, which was the one scheduling boundary she held, without negotiation, because she had decided early that Micah would not grow up feeling like a secondary priority in his own mother's life, regardless of how tight everything else was. She lost 4 pounds during those 6 weeks that she could not afford to lose. She hired a woman named Britt in December, older, steadier, with 10 years of cafe experience and the kind of calm, professional competence that Amara recognized immediately and paid slightly above market rate to secure. Britt showed up on her first day, looked around the cafe, and said, "You've built something real here. People don't always know how to do that." Amara said, "I'm still figuring out if the math works." Britt said, "The math always looks worse than it is in year 1. Year 2 is where you find out what it actually is." She was right, as it turned out. Year 2 was harder in some ways. The cafe needed equipment upgrades. She hired a second part-time person. The Pioneer Square neighborhood went through a rough patch that winter with increased street disturbance that kept some of her regulars away, but the underlying numbers were cleaner. She was not profitable yet. Not technically, but she could see the shape of profitability from where she was standing. The way you can see a shoreline from a boat in fog, not clearly, but clearly enough to know it's real and to keep rowing toward it. The third near break was the one that left a mark. It came in the spring of year 2, on a Tuesday, and it arrived in the form of Derek Holloway walking into Juniper and Ash at 9 in the morning, as if he had not spent the last 2.5 years being entirely absent from her life. She was behind the counter when he came in. She saw him before he saw her, which gave her approximately 3 seconds to decide how to carry herself. She used those 3 seconds well. By the time his eyes found her, she was standing straight, her expression neutral, her hands already moving to the next order, as if his presence had not just sent a current of pure adrenaline through her, from the base of her spine to the back of her skull. He looked, she noticed, like someone who had not been sleeping well. Shadows under his eyes that she did not remember being there, and something in the way he carried himself had shifted less of the easy forward momentum she had always associated with him, more of a man who had learned to brace for impact. He came to the counter. Amara, Derek. Her voice was even, professional. The voice she used when she was managing a difficult client conversation and needed to hold the room without betraying any particular feeling about what was happening in it. "Can I get you?" He looked at her for a moment. Something moved across his face recognition, maybe, of what the question meant coming from her in that tone. "Just a coffee," he said. "Black," she made it. Slid it across the counter. Named the price. Watched him pay without trying to start a conversation she had not invited. He stepped to the side. He did not leave. She served 2 more customers. When she had a moment, she looked at him. He was standing near the window, holding the cup, not drinking from it. "Is there something else?" she said. He came back to the counter, lowered his voice slightly, though the morning rush had thinned enough that it was not strictly necessary. "You look good," he said. "Derek." "I know." He put his hand up. "I know. I didn't come here to..." He stopped, looked at the coffee. "I heard about this place. A colleague mentioned it. I didn't know it was yours until I looked it up." She said nothing. "It's beautiful," he said. "The space. I just wanted you to know that." "Thank you," she said. Flat, not cruel but not warm. The temperature of a door that is technically still open, but that you should not mistake for an invitation. He nodded. He understood. She could see him understanding. "Is there..." He stopped himself again. "Are you okay?" "Like, actually." "I am," she said. "I've been building something. It keeps me pretty occupied." He heard what was underneath that sentence. He was not a stupid man. That had never been his problem. "Good," he said quietly. "That's good." He left the coffee on the counter, half full, and walked out. She watched him go. Then she picked up the cup, poured what was left down the drain, washed it, and moved on to the next thing. She did not tell anyone about that visit, either. But that night, after Micah was asleep, she sat in the kitchen with a cup of tea she didn't drink and thought about the look on Derek's face when he had walked in. Not the guilt, which she had expected. Something else. Something that looked almost like grief, which she had not expected, and which irritated her in ways she did not entirely want to examine. She went to bed. She did not sleep well. Kang Do-yun first appeared on a Wednesday morning in October, 3 years after Juniper and Ash opened. Amara did not notice him particularly on that first visit. She noticed the quality of his coat charcoal wool, clearly expensive, clearly not purchased anywhere near Pioneer Square, and she noticed that he ordered without looking at the menu board, which suggested he had either researched the cafe beforehand or had a level of coffee knowledge that made menus largely redundant. He ordered a hand-drip Ethiopian, single origin, and he asked one question. What was the bloom time she used? She told him. 45 seconds. He nodded, as if this confirmed something he had already suspected. He sat at the corner table near the window, the one with the slightly uneven leg that she kept meaning to fix and had fixed twice already without fully resolving. And he drank his coffee and read something on his phone, and left a tip that was larger than the drink itself. He came back Thursday. He came back Friday. By the following Wednesday, he was simply a regular, the way regulars happen in a small cafe, not through formal declaration, but through the accumulation of appearances until their absence would be the thing you noticed. She learned his name 3 weeks in, when he paid with a card for the first time. Kang Do-yun. She had a moment of recognition. The name appeared in certain Seattle business contexts, shipping and logistics, Pacific Rim trade relationships. The sound kind of corporate infrastructure that generated press releases rather than news coverage, but she did not connect the name to anything more specific than that for some time. What she noticed instead was more immediate. He never brought anyone with him. For a man who, she would later understand, was rarely without at least one other person within functional proximity, this was a deliberate choice. Inside Juniper and Ash, he arrived alone, sat alone, and left alone. He did not take calls at the table. He did not open a laptop. He drank his coffee with the focused attention of someone who had decided that this was what this hour was for, and no other thing was going to encroach on it. It was, she thought, a surprisingly disciplined way to exist. She had begun to recognize it as a kind of respect. Not for her, specifically or not only for her, for the space she had built, for what the cafe was trying to be. There was something in the way Do-yun sat in it that told her he understood, without being told, what it had cost to make a place feel like this. Micah was 3.5 when he first met Do-yun, and the meeting was unremarkable in the way that genuinely significant things sometimes are. Amara had brought Micah to the cafe on a Saturday, which she did occasionally when her usual childcare arrangements fell through, and she had no choice but to integrate the two parts of her life that she generally worked hard to keep separate. Micah sat in the back corner with a carton of apple juice and a picture book, and he was, as he often was when given a book and a contained space, entirely self-sufficient for stretches of 20 minutes at a time. Do-yun was at his regular table. At some point in the mid-morning, Micah finished his book, looked around, decided the back corner was no longer interesting, and wandered to the front of the cafe. He stood in the middle of the room and looked at Do-yun with the frank, uncomplicated appraisal that small children bring to strangers, completely unbothered by the social pressure that makes adults look away. Do-yun looked back at him. "Hi," Micah said. Do-yun said, "What are you doing?" "Drinking coffee." Micah considered this with great seriousness. "Is it good?" "It is. Your mother makes excellent coffee." Micah nodded, satisfied, and went back to his corner. Amara had watched the exchange from behind the counter. She did not intervene. She watched Do-yun return to his phone without performing anything, without the exaggerated warmth that adults sometimes deploy around small children to signal their own wholesomeness, and without the careful indifference that people use when they want to avoid engagement. He had simply spoken to Micah the way you speak to a person who has asked you a question. Something about that stayed with her. By the time Juniper and Ash reached its third full year of operation, it had become something Amara had not entirely allowed herself to plan for, because planning for it had felt too much like tempting a reversal. It had become genuinely beloved. Not famous, not viral, not the subject of trend pieces in regional lifestyle publications. Beloved in the specific way that small, serious, well-run neighborhood places become beloved, through repetition and consistency, and the accumulation of small moments in which people felt like they had been treated like adults who knew what they wanted. She had a staff of 4 now. Britt had become her de facto floor manager, which was a title Amara had created somewhat informally and compensated for in the way she could afford to, which was imperfectly but sincerely. A sound like green wood splitting, she had expanded the menu twice carefully, adding things that made sense within what the cafe already was, rather than things that would require it to become something different. She had paid off the build-out loan. She had started a modest savings account for Micah. She had not, in 3 years, taken a single vacation. Do-yun had been coming to Juniper and Ash for nearly 8 months before he said anything to her beyond what was necessary for the transaction. It happened on a Tuesday in June, a slow morning after a long holiday weekend, when the cafe was quiet in the way that follows a period of unusual busyness, the calm that has a slightly different texture than regular calm, flatter, a little depleted. She was wiping down the bar when he spoke. "You've been open 3 years," he said. It was not a question. She looked up. "Just past it." "Yes." "It's harder than the first 2, he said. "Year 3. She studied him for a moment. "How would you know?" "I've started several businesses," he said it without emphasis. "The way you state a fact that is neither impressive nor apologetic. Year 1, you're surviving. Year 2, you're figuring out whether survival is all it was. Year 3 is when you find out if you actually built something, or just got through something." She looked at him for a long moment. "Which is it?" he asked. "I'm still finding out," she said. He nodded, picked up his coffee, and went back to his table. But after that, they talked. Not every day, not at length. She was running a business, not hosting a conversation, and he seemed to understand the distinction instinctively. But here and there, in the gaps between the morning rush and the mid-morning quiet, they exchanged sentences that accumulated into something. She learned that Kang Pacific Holdings had offices in 4 cities and managed freight relationships across 12 countries. She learned that he had built the company from a smaller operation his father had started in Busan 30 years earlier. She learned that he had been in Seattle for 11 years and considered it home with the particular conviction of someone who chose their home rather than inheriting it. She did not learn, not yet, what else lived underneath the corporate structure. What other arrangement supported the empire? What the name Kang Do-yun meant in certain rooms that never appeared in any business press. She did not know that the men who flanked him when he traveled were not assistants. She did not know why he sometimes arrived at the cafe, looking like a man who had been awake since before dawn, managing a problem that had no clean solution. She did not know, and he did not tell her. And the version of him she was coming to know, the man who sat in her cafe and drank her coffee and spoke to her son Sinsan without condescension and tipped with a quiet generosity that had nothing performative, and it was real, was just not complete. The award came in March of year 5. The Pacific Northwest Hospitality Excellence Award was not the largest recognition in the industry, but it was specific and credible, a regional panel, a rigorous nomination process, a history of selecting places that had genuine staying power rather than trending novelty. Juniper and Ash won in the category of Independent Food and Beverage Excellence, and Amara stood at a podium in a hotel ballroom in Bellevue and accepted it with the particular composure of a woman who had decided years earlier that she was allowed to be proud of what she had built without apologizing for the fact that she had built it alone. She mentioned Micah in her remarks. She mentioned Britt and the rest of her staff by name. She did not mention Derek, or Vanessa, or the bedroom doorway, or the decision she had made sitting on a couch, holding 2 cold cups of coffee. She thanked the community of Pioneer Square, which had kept showing up. The ceremony was covered in 3 regional publications and 1 national industry newsletter. A local television segment ran 2 days later. Within 48 hours, the Juniper and Ash social media pages had gained more followers than in the previous 8 months combined. Amara handled the surge with the same operational discipline she applied to everything. She updated the website. She prepared her staff for increased traffic. She did not raise prices, did not extend hours beyond what her team could sustain without burning out. Did not say yes to the 2 catering inquiries that came in that week because she knew the cafe's kitchen was not positioned for that without significant infrastructure changes she was not ready to make. She built it. She would protect it the same way she had built it, carefully and on her own terms. She did not know, in those first bright days after the award, that someone was already reading those terms as a target. The post appeared on a Thursday morning, 11 days after the award ceremony. Amara saw it because Britt showed it to her, holding out her phone across the counter at 7:15 with an expression that Amara had not seen on Britt's face before, tight, careful, the look of someone who is delivering information they wish they were not delivering. The post was on a consumer review aggregator, not the primary platforms, but one of the secondary ones that had enough traffic to matter. The account was anonymous. The username was a string of numbers and letters that meant nothing. The review was long. It described, in specific and clinical detail, a visit to Juniper and Ash 3 weeks earlier, before the award, during which the anonymous customer had allegedly observed unsanitary conditions in the kitchen, area visible from the had consumed a breakfast item, and had subsequently suffered severe gastrointestinal illness requiring medical attention. The language was careful. It was the language of someone who understood how to write something that sounded credible, specific enough to seem like memory, vague enough to avoid anything easily disprovable. Amara read it twice. Then she handed the phone back to Britt. "Okay," she said. Britt waited. "Pull the last 3 health inspection reports," Amara said. "All supplier certifications current as of this month. The temperature logs for the last 30 days. The cleaning schedule sign-off sheets." She paused. "Everything. Already started," Britt said. Amara looked at the morning light coming through the cafe windows, at the first customers of the day settling into their seats, at the space she had spent 5 years making into something worth being in. Her jaw was tight. Her hands were steady. "Someone wrote that," she said quietly, more to herself than to Britt. "Someone sat down and wrote that." Britt said nothing. "Find out everything the platform will tell you about that account," Amara said. "Posting history, anything public. I want to know who sat down and wrote that." She turned back to the counter. She had customers to serve. By the end of the day, the post had been shared 14 times. By the following morning, it had been shared 41 times, picked up by 2 local food community social media accounts with significant followings, and generated 67 comments, most of them from people who had never been to Juniper and Ash and who were performing, with considerable enthusiasm, the particular social media ritual of concerned outrage on behalf of a situation they had no personal information about. Amara released a public statement that afternoon. Transparent, factual, professional. She linked to her 3 most recent health inspection reports, all of which showed scores in the upper range. She linked to her supplier certification page. She stated that she took any concern about food safety with the utmost seriousness and invited anyone with a genuine complaint to contact her directly. The statement was shared widely. It did not stop the spread of the original post. That evening, after Micah was in bed, Amara sat at the kitchen table and stared at her laptop screen and tried to locate the specific feeling she was having so she could manage it accurately. It was not panic. Panic was not something she allowed herself, because panic was not useful, and she was not in the business of feeling things that weren't useful. It was not quite fear either, though it was adjacent to it. It was the feeling of watching something she had built with her hands be touched by hands that had no right to touch it. Her phone rang. Do-yun, she picked up. "I saw the statement," he said without preamble. "Are you handling it?" "I'm working on it," she said. "If you need, I'm working on it," she said again. The repetition was not impolite. It was a boundary, stated plainly, for a man she had come to trust with certain things, and who she needed to know this was not one of those things. "Not yet." A brief silence. "All right," he said. "I'm here." She put the phone down. She opened another window on her laptop and began drafting a formal cease and desist inquiry to the platform, requesting the account information associated with the post under applicable consumer protection statutes. It was past midnight when her youngest employee, Marcus, 24, sharp, the kind of digitally literate that made him invaluable, for exactly this type of problem, sent her a message. "Found something. You need to see this." She typed back immediately. "Send it." What Marcus sent her was a screenshot comparison. On the left side, a section of the anonymous review, a specific turn of phrase, a particular construction describing the alleged kitchen observation. On the right side, a social media post from 18 months earlier on a personal account that was public, that used nearly identical language, the same syntactic fingerprint, the same slightly unusual word choice, in a complaint about a different restaurant entirely. The personal account had a name. The name was not immediately familiar, but beneath the name was a profile photograph. Amara stared at it. The photograph showed a woman at what appeared to be a rooftop party, laughing at something off camera, her head tilted back, her hair long and styled, one hand raised with a drink in it. Amara had taken that photograph herself, 6 years ago, at a birthday party in Capitol Hill. The woman in the photograph was Vanessa Cole. Amara set her phone down on the table. She placed both hands flat on the surface, palms down, and looked at the wall. The woman who had been in her bed with her fiancé. The woman who had disappeared without a word of apology. The woman Amara had spent 5 years outpacing, outbuilding, outsurviving without ever once looking back. That woman had watched Amara accept an award in a Bellevue ballroom and had sat down in front of a screen and tried to burn it. Amara's breathing was measured. Her eyes were dry. Her hands were still flat on the table. She picked up her phone and called Do-yun. He answered on the second ring. "It was Vanessa," she said. The silence on the other end of the line lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then Do-yun said, in a voice that was very quiet and absolutely without inflection, "Tell me what you need." And Amara, for the first time in 5 years, understood that she was at a place in her life where the answer to that question could no longer be nothing, because this was no longer something she could resolve by being tougher or more, documented or more disciplined than the person trying to destroy her. This required something she had never allowed herself to ask for. She exhaled. I need to know everything, she said. Everything you can find out about what she's done and where it's gone and how far it's spread. Everything. Can you do that? Yes, he said, without anyone getting hurt. A pause. Yes, he said again. Then do it, she said. She hung up. She sat in the kitchen of her Beacon Hill apartment, alone. The same kitchen where she had first opened that business plan spreadsheet 6 years ago with Micah sleeping on her chest. A sound like green wood splitting, and she understood with complete clarity that the next move she made would either protect everything she had built or prove that some damage cannot be survived twice by the same person. She was not going to let it be the second one. She did not sleep that night. Not because she was crying, not because she was falling apart at the seams in the way that might have been expected of someone who had just discovered that a woman from her former life was methodically attempting to dismantle the business she had spent 5 years bleeding to build. She did not sleep because her mind would not permit the downshift. It stayed at operational speed, cycling through the same set of facts with the relentless precision of a machine that does not know how to idle. Vanessa Cole, the syntactic fingerprint, the anonymous account, the 41 shares, the 67 comments, the faces of her 4 employees who showed up every morning because they believed in what Juniper and Ash was. She sat at the kitchen table until 3 in the morning. She made a list. Not an emotional list. Not a list of grievances or recriminations or the things she wanted to say to Vanessa Cole if she ever had her in a room. Practical list. Documentation she already had. Documentation she needed to gather. Legal avenues, platform reporting mechanisms, local media contacts she had built relationships with over 5 years of operating in Pioneer Square. She wrote it in the notebook she kept beside the laptop, the one with the cracked spine from being opened flat too many times, and her handwriting was small and even and did not change character from the top of the page to the bottom. 3:14 she went to bed. At 5:40 she was up. Micah woke at 6:15 and wanted cereal with the blueberries on the side, not mixed in, because he was 5 years old and had recently developed a set of very specific preferences about the geometry of his breakfast. She gave him the cereal with the blueberries on the side. She drank her coffee standing at the counter. She listened to him tell her about a dream he'd had involving a dog that could talk and a skateboard made of bread. And she tracked every word with the full attention she always gave him in the morning. Because the morning was his time, and she had made that rule for herself years ago, and she did not break her own rules. She dropped him at school at 7:50. She was at the cafe by 8:10. Do-yun was already at his table. This was unusual. He typically arrived between 8:30 and 9, after the first rush had peaked. That he was there before her told her something she filed away without comment. He stood when she came in. She had never seen him do that before. Sit down, she said without hostility. You don't have to do that. He sat. He had a folder on the table closed, one hand resting on top of it. She went behind the counter, checked in with Britt on the morning status, confirmed the equipment was running cleanly, poured herself a coffee she would not have time to drink at the pace the morning was already moving, and then came around and sat across from Do-yun. She looked at the folder. How bad, she said. The platform post is the visible part, he said. He spoke without preamble, without softening the directness she had come to rely on as a fundamental aspect of who he was. Marcus found the right thread. We followed it. He opened the folder. Inside were printed screenshots, multiple pages organized with paper clips. She looked at them in order as he talked. The anonymous review account on the secondary platform was, as Marcus had identified, traceable through language pattern analysis to a personal account belonging to Vanessa Cole. But that account was not the beginning of the campaign. It was the most recent and most visible end of something that had been running for 4 months. 4 months. The number landed in Amara's chest the same way it had years ago, in a different context, from a different mouth. Kept her face neutral. What Do-yun's people, and she understood now, with greater clarity than she had permitted herself before, that when he said, we followed it, he meant people with access to resources and methods that no ordinary corporate investigation firm deployed had found was a pattern. Coordinated pattern. Anonymous comments on Juniper and Ash's primary review platforms, going back to just before the award nomination was announced. Most of them were small one-star ratings with no text, the kind that platforms frequently filtered out, but that accumulated in the algorithm in ways that affected overall score. A few were more substantive, again anonymous, again using the precise syntactic register that Marcus had identified. There was also a thread in a private Seattle food community, online group membership-based, several thousand members, the kind of insider group that food and hospitality professionals monitored because it moved faster than any publication in which someone with a different anonymous handle had been seeding doubt about Juniper and Ash's supply chain for 11 weeks. Not accusations. Questions. Carefully framed questions designed to imply concern without stating anything falsifiable. Has anyone looked into where their dairy comes from? Asking because I heard something but can't say more. Does anyone know if they've had their vent serviced recently? Just a thing I noticed. The posts generated responses. The responses generated discussion. The discussion sowed uncertainty in exactly the people, industry, insiders, food journalists, the community members whose opinion other community members trusted that a restaurant depended on when something went wrong. Amara turned the last page. She put it face down on the table. She looked at the window. Outside, a woman was walking past, with a cup of coffee in one hand and her phone in the other, not watching where she was going, making it work somehow anyway, the way people do in cities. 4 months, Amara said. At least Do-yun said. She looked back at him. The nomination was announced 4 months ago. Yes. She thought about that. She thought about Vanessa Cole sitting in front of a screen 4 months ago, reading about the nomination and making a decision. She thought about the 4 months of careful, patient, methodical effort, the multiple accounts, the different platforms, the insider group seeding, and she felt something she had not expected to feel. Not rage. She had prepared for rage and knew how to manage it. Something colder than rage. The recognition that this had required sustained effort, that Vanessa had shown up for this every week for 4 months, with more consistency than she had shown up for their friendship across 11 years. What does she want? Amara said. Not a question, a thing she was thinking aloud. I don't think it's about wanting something, Do-yun said carefully. I think it's about not being able to tolerate what you have. Amara looked at him. I've dealt with this dynamic before, he said. In business. When someone can't build something themselves, they tell themselves the only alternative is destruction. She did not respond to that immediately. She looked at the folder. Can any of this be proven publicly? She said. The pattern. The connection to her. Some of it. The language analysis is substantive enough that a defamation attorney would know what to do with it. The insider group posts are harder. She used a VPN and a clean account. But the original review account has enough fingerprints that it's workable. I'm not going to sue her, Amara said. Do-yun looked at her. Not because I couldn't, she said, because it turns this into her story. And she doesn't get my story. He was quiet for a moment. Then what do you want to do? I want to expose it, she said. Publicly. Cleanly. The documentation, the pattern, the timeline. I want everyone who shared that post and commented on it and used it to seed doubt to see exactly what it was and where it came from. She paused. I want to do it without threats, without anyone being touched. I want to do it with the truth, the way I've done everything else. Something shifted in Do-yun's expression. She caught it before he could smooth it away, not surprise exactly, but something adjacent to it, as if she had answered a question he had not known he was asking. That will take longer, he said, and it won't be as complete. I know, she said. I'm not interested in complete. I'm interested in right. She stood. The morning rush had fully materialized around them while they'd been talking, and Britt was managing it with her usual composure, but an extra pair of hands behind the counter was not nothing. Can your people help with the documentation compilation? Amara said. Legitimate channels only. Yes. Then let's start, she said. She went back behind the counter. What happened over the following 72 hours was the most sustained exercise in controlled pressure Amara had undertaken since the months after Derek left. She did not sleep more than 5 hours on any of those nights. She worked the cafe during business hours because closing or reducing hours would have been the precise outcome the campaign was designed to produce. and she refused to give that to it, and spent her evenings with her attorney, a woman named Patricia who had handled her financial separation from Derek years earlier, and who was, as Amara had already established, both excellent and entirely unsentimental. Patricia reviewed the language analysis documentation, the timeline of coordinated posts, the screenshots Marcus had compiled, and the comparison that connected the anonymous account to Vanessa Cole's public profile. She asked sharp, specific questions and took notes in a handwriting that was difficult to read and apparently sufficient for her own purposes. "This is workable," Patricia said. "The defamation case would be real. Sustained campaign, documented origin, traceable financial harm. The award coverage followed by the drop in traffic gives you causation." "I'm not suing," Amara said. Patricia looked at her over the rim of her glasses. "I know you're not, but you should know you could. What else can we do with what we have? Platform reporting with this documentation is a near certain removal. Primary aggregator has a coordinated, inauthentic behavior policy. This pattern satisfies it, clearly. The insider group, their moderation team, would likely act if presented with evidence of VPN-masked coordinated posting. Do the platform filings today," Amara said. "Both platforms, formal submissions, everything attached. I'll have them drafted by end of day. And I want to go public," Amara said. "Not with her name. Not yet, and maybe not at all. But with the full timeline. The documentation. I want people to see what a coordinated smear campaign looks like from the inside." Patricia considered that. "Legally, it's fine, as long as we don't name her without the case fully built. And it does something the platform filings alone don't do." "What?" "It changes the story from Cafe, accused of food safety violations, to Cafe proves coordinated attack after award win. The second story is better for you in every way." "That's what I want," Amara said. "Set up the filings. I'll handle the public piece." The piece went out on a Friday morning. Amara wrote it herself, at the kitchen table, starting at 9:30 the previous evening, and finishing at 12:40. She did not use a PR firm, did not run it through a copywriter, did not show it to anyone except Patricia for legal review, and Britt, because Britt had been with her through enough that she deserved to see it before it went out. Britt read it at the kitchen table with a cup of tea she didn't touch, and when she was done, she looked up and said, "This is going to work." "It might not," Amara said. "No," Britt said. "This is going to work." The piece was published on the Juniper Ash website and cross-posted to their social platforms at 7 in the morning. It laid out the full timeline, the nomination, the coordinated posting pattern, the anonymous accounts, the insider group seeding, the language analysis, the platform filing. It included the full inspection and certification documentation in linked form. It was 4 pages long, and it read like what it was: a careful, precise, thoroughly documented account of what had been done and exactly how it had been done, written by someone who had built something with her own hands and was not going to let it be destroyed by someone who sat in the dark and typed. It did not name Vanessa Cole. It did not need to. By noon, it had been shared 600 times. By 3 in the afternoon, it had been picked up by 2 local media outlets and 1 national food industry publication. The platform removed the original anonymous review at 4:17. The insider group suspended the anonymous account at 5:40. By 6, the local television station that had run the original award segment 2 weeks earlier had called to request a follow-up interview. Amara was in the back of the cafe, running through end-of-day inventory, when Do-yun appeared in the doorway between the front space and the back. She looked up. "The TV station called," she said. "I'm doing the interview Monday." "I know," he said. "I saw the shares." She went back to the inventory sheet. "It's moving." "Yes." He came into the back space, which was not large, and stood with his hands in his coat pockets. He did not look like a man who was accustomed to standing in the back rooms of small cafes, but he did not look uncomfortable either. He looked like a man who was exactly where he had chosen to be. "You could have let me handle it differently," he said. "Faster." "I know." She would have had no platform left within 24 hours. No professional standing. The people she depends on, for the income that funds this kind of campaign, they would have been contacted. Not threatened. Just informed of certain things. "I know you could have done that," Amara said. "Why didn't you let me?" She set the inventory sheet down. She turned and looked at him directly, the way she looked at things she needed to see clearly. Because the moment I let fear be used as a tool to protect something I built without fear, it becomes a different thing, she said. And I built this specific thing. I want to protect this specific thing. He looked at her for a long moment. What if it hadn't worked, he said. Then I would have figured out the next step, she said, the way I always have. He nodded slowly. There was something in his face she had not seen before. Not admiration, exactly, or not only admiration. Something more like the specific expression of a person who has spent a long time believing that a certain approach is the only effective one, and has just been shown, with some force, that it is not. He said, I have something to tell you. She waited. What I do, he said. What Kang Pacific is. He paused. The pause had weight. There is a part of it that I have not told you about, that I have been careful not to tell you about. The back room was very quiet. I know, she said. He looked at her. I've known for a while, she said. I didn't ask because... She stopped, thought about the right way to say the next thing. Because what you are in here is real. And I wasn't ready to put that up against whatever the other thing is. You should put it up against it, he said. You should know what it is. Tell me, she said. He told her. Not everything she understood, even as he spoke. That everything was not something that could be transmitted in a single conversation in the back room of a cafe at the end of a day. But enough the organization, the scope, the specific nature of the relationships that had built Kang Pacific's reach into ports and freight corridors, and the kind of Pacific Rim's logistics that did not appear in any company filing. The name that meant something very different in certain rooms than it did in the ones she had access to. She listened without interrupting. When he was done, the back room was still quiet. She could hear the front-of-house sound of Britt finishing the closing routine, the familiar clatter and wipe down. The music that Britt always put on low for the last 20 minutes of the day. Amara looked at the floor for a moment. Then she looked at him. Why are you telling me this now? She said. Because you just spent 3 days fighting for something you built with the truth, he said. And I have been standing next to you for 2 years with a significant portion of my own life built on something else. And I cannot, he stopped. His jaw was tight. This was, she understood, not easy for him. This was a man who had built structures of control around every part of his life, and he was dismantling one of those structures voluntarily, in real time, because he had decided it was the right thing to do. I cannot keep asking you to trust me, he said, while keeping the thing that would change what that trust means. The silence stretched. Her heart was doing something complicated in her chest that she was not going to acknowledge yet. I need to think, she said. I know. I need you to not be here while I think. I know that's, he said again. He straightened. He did not reach for her, did not try to close the distance. He simply looked at her with the full, unguarded weight of a man who has put something down that he cannot pick back up. Then he left. She locked the cafe at 7:15 and drove home in silence. Micah was at her downstairs neighbor's Mrs. Chen, 68, retired, who had become something close to essential over the years, in the way that certain neighbors do, through the accumulation of small reliabilities. Amara texted that she would pick him up by 8. She sat in her car outside the building for 6 minutes. Sound. She thought about what Do-yun had told her. She thought about it the way she thought about the hard things, not with the emotion first, but with the shape of it. What it meant structurally. What it meant for Micah. What it meant for the choices she had made, the trust she had extended, the version of Do-yun she had allowed into her life, and into her son's life over 2 years. The version she had allowed in was real. She kept coming back to that. Question was whether real was enough. She picked up Micah. He was in the middle of a story when she knocked on Mrs. Chen's door, something about a classmate who had brought a snake to school in his backpack and been very surprised when the teacher noticed. Story, subplot, a story with several subplots and a moral that Micah had not fully worked out yet, and he transferred seamlessly into her arms and kept talking all the way up the stairs and through the apartment door and into his pajamas, with a particular narrative momentum of a 5-year-old who has been storing up information all day and has found his audience. At last. She listened to every word. She tucked him in. She sat on the edge of his bed in the dark until his breathing evened out. Then she went to the kitchen. She opened her laptop. She had 11 new emails about the piece she had published that morning. 3 from media contacts, 2 from other small business owners who had experienced similar coordinated review attacks and wanted to know how she had documented it. One from the food industry publication that had covered it, asking for an expanded interview. She read them all. She did not respond to any of them that night. She opened a new document. She stared at the blank page. She was not thinking about the emails, or the interview requests, or the 600 shares, or the platform removals. She was thinking about Do-yun in the back room of the cafe, standing with his hands in his coat pockets, telling her the truth about himself at a moment when she had not asked for it, specifically at a moment when the cost of telling it was highest, because she was already dealing with enough, and he had chosen to add this weight to the moment anyway, because he believed she deserved to have it. She closed the laptop. She sat in the kitchen with the light on and the apartment quiet. Then her phone rang. The number on the screen was not Do-yun's. It was Derek's. She stared at it. 3 rings. 4. She picked up. Derek? Her voice was steady. She had not spoken to him since the visit to the cafe 2 years earlier, and before that the doorway, and before that the things that could not be undone. I saw the thing you published today. His voice was careful, measured in the way people are measured when they are not sure how much room they have. About the cafe, the what happened with the review. Okay, she said. I saw the award too, a couple weeks ago. I saw it and he stopped. I told someone from back then. I told him I was proud of you, that I'd seen the article. His voice changed, tightened. I didn't know she would do something with that. Amara's entire body went still. Who did you tell, she said. The silence on the line was 3 seconds long. 3 seconds in which Amara's mind ran the calculation with a speed and clarity that surprised even her. The timing of the campaign launch 4 months ago matched to the announcement of the award nomination. And now Derek telling her he had spoken to someone from back then. Derek, she said. Her voice was very low, very even. Who did you tell, Vanessa, he said. She exhaled. Not a sharp exhale, not a sound of surprise. Just a slow release, the kind the body produces when it has been holding a tension it did not know it was holding, and the truth finally arrives and removes the need for it. You called Vanessa, she said, to tell her about the award. Because I wanted to tell someone who knew you. From before. I thought she'd be. He stopped. I didn't know she still. What did she say, Amara said. When you told her. Pause. She said she'd heard about it, Derek said. She said she was happy for you. Another pause. She didn't sound happy. The kitchen was very quiet. Outside, the city continued its night business, the distant sound of a siren. Someone's car door. The wind in the maple outside the window that had been losing branches slowly all autumn. Amara, Derek said. I'm sorry, I didn't think. No, she said, you didn't. Is there anything I can do? She thought about that question. She thought about it carefully, the way she thought about all the questions that deserved more than a reflexive answer. There's something you should know, she said. Something I've been deciding whether to tell you for a long time. The line was very quiet. Micah, she said. The word sat on the line between them. Derek's breathing changed. She could hear it shift, hear the quality of the silence on his end, transform into something different and heavier. He's mine, Derek said. It was not a question. It was the sound of a man who had known a thing he had never allowed himself to say. Yes, she said. The silence that followed was the longest of the conversation. She sat with it. She did not fill it. She let it be what it was, the sound of a man on the other end of a phone understanding. In real time, the full dimension of what his choices had cost him. Not just the woman he was supposed to marry. The 6 years of a child's life he had no knowledge he was missing. Amara, I'm not calling you to start something, she said. I'm telling you because you should know. Any relationship you have with him, if that's something you want to pursue, happens slowly, on terms that protect him. Not you, not me, him. Her voice did not break. Her hands, she noticed, were gripping the edge of the table. Do you understand, she said. Yes, Derek said, barely audible. Good night, Derek, she said. She hung up. She sat in the kitchen. She placed both palms flat on the table. She breathed. The truth was, she had expected that call to feel like something more conclusive. Some kind of final sealing off, a door swinging closed on the last room of a house she no longer lived in. Instead, it felt open, unresolved in ways she had not anticipated. Because Derek knowing about Micah was not an ending, it was a new and complicated beginning, one she had not had the bandwidth to fully think through. In the weeks after the award and the smear campaign and Do-yun's revelation, And now here it was. One more significant thing sitting on the table of her life, waiting for her attention. She looked at the ceiling. She looked at the time. 11:43. She had to be up at 5. She got up from the table. She checked Micah's room. He was on his back, one arm flung out, his face slack with the absolute confidence of a child who does not know yet about the complications waiting in the world outside his sleep. She stood in the doorway and looked at him for a moment. Then she went to bed. She closed her eyes. For the first time in 11 days, she slept without her mind running through the list. She was still asleep when her phone lit up at 6:12 with a notification she would not see until morning. A message from Marcus, sent at 2 in the morning. Reading only. You need to see this. Call me when you're up. And beneath it, a screenshot from Vanessa Cole's personal social media account public, posted at 1:47 in the morning, splitting, clearly written in the specific reckless register of someone who has been drinking and has crossed the line from feeling something privately into the catastrophic decision to say it where everyone can see. The post read, "Some people get awards for being lucky and call it hard work. I knew her when she was nothing. She hasn't changed, just gotten better at the performance. The truth about Juniper and Ash will come out. And when it does, don't say I didn't try to warn people." Stamped with her full name, her photograph, her location tagged as Seattle, Washington. The anonymous campaign, in a single late-night post made by a woman who could not tolerate watching Amara survive, had just become a signed confession, and Amara Ellison, asleep in her apartment with her son breathing steadily down the hall, was about to wake up to a situation that had irrevocably changed and could not be managed the way she had managed everything else, because this was no longer a fight she could win by being more documented, more disciplined, or more composed than the person trying to destroy her. This required her to decide, once and for all, exactly how much she was willing to let herself need the man who had told her the truth about himself at the highest possible cost, and whether the version of strength she had been practicing for 6 years was big enough to include. She saw Marcus's message at 6:19. She read it twice, standing in the hallway outside Micah's room, still in the clothes she had fallen asleep in, her hair pressed flat on one side from the pillow. She opened the screenshot. She read Vanessa's post. She read it again, slowly, the way you read something when your first pass can't fully process the scale of what you're looking at. Then she called Marcus. He picked up on the first ring, which meant he had been awake and waiting. "How many shares?" she said. "As of right now, 214. It went up fast between 2 and 4, slowed down after that because of the hour. It'll spike again when the West Coast fully wakes up." Comments? 309. Mix of people calling her out and people who think she's brave for saying it. Amara looked at the time. 6:21. She had 40 minutes before she needed to get Micah up and moving. "Is her account still up?" she said. "Yes. She hasn't deleted the post." "She will," Amara said. "When she sobers up and realizes what she's done, she'll delete it. Screen record everything right now. Every comment, every share, the timestamp, all of it. Do it before she wakes up and panics." "Already running," Marcus said. "Good." She moved into the kitchen, put the kettle on by muscle memory. "Call Patricia when her office opens. Tell her to look at her phone before she has her first coffee. She'll know what to do. Should I call?" Marcus stopped himself. "Call who?" Amara said. Pause. "Mr. Kang's office reached out last night," Marcus said. Carefully. After the post went up, they said to let them know if anything changed overnight. Amara stood at the counter with her hand on the kettle. "His office." She said yes. Not him directly. No. She understood what that meant. Do-yun had given her space, had kept his word about the space she had asked for, and had simultaneously set up a perimeter around her while she used it. He was not pressing in. He was not absent. He was doing the particular thing that she had come to understand over 2 years was his most instinctive mode, positioning himself so that when she needed something, the distance between need and resource was as small as possible. She had not decided yet what to do with what he had told her. But she had decided somewhere in the 5 hours she had slept, something more immediate. "Tell them," she said, "that I need the complete documentation package, everything his people compiled on the coordinated campaign in Patricia's hands by 9 this morning, in a format that holds up. And tell them I said thank you. I'll tell them now." Marcus said. She hung up. She made Micah's breakfast. She got him up, got him dressed, listened to the continuation of yesterday's snake story, which had developed 3 new plot points overnight in the generative way that children's stories do, when they've had time to ferment in the subconscious. She drove him to school. She kissed him at the door. She watched him run inside without looking back, the way children do when they are confident enough in being loved that they don't need to check if it's still there. She sat in the parked car outside the school for 90 seconds. Then she drove to the cafe. Pioneer Square at 7:40 in the morning had its particular character, the light coming low and gray off the sound, the smell of the waterfront mixed with coffee, and the particular urban morning smell of pavement that has been wet and is now drying. She had been walking into this neighborhood, into this block, for 5 years, and she knew its texture the way you know the texture of something you've depended on long enough for it to become part of your proprioception. She unlocked the front door of Juniper and Ash. She turned on the lights. She stood in the empty cafe for a moment, the chairs still up on the tables from last night's closing, the equipment cold and waiting. A sound like greenwood, the light coming through the east-facing windows at an angle that made the whole space look briefly like something in a painting, and she looked at it. This was what someone had tried to take from her. This quiet, specific, irreplaceable thing. She began her opening routine. Britt arrived at 7:50 and read the situation the way she always read situations without being told, through the specific quality of Amara's posture and the fact that the prep work was already half done at a time when it usually wasn't. "Show me," Britt said. Amara showed her the post on her phone. Britt read it. Her jaw tightened. She handed the phone back. "She put her name on it," Britt said. "She did. That's not smart." "No," Amara said. "It's not." Britt looked at her. "How do you want to handle the floor today?" "If the story gets picked up before close." "Same as every other day," Amara said. "We open. We serve. We do the work." She paused. "If anyone asks, we have no comment on anything except the statement we already published. That statement stands and the documentation speaks for itself." Britt nodded. This was the answer she had expected, and she moved immediately into the opening tasks with the efficiency of someone who had watched Amara navigate difficulty before and knew the most useful thing she could do was help the machinery run clean. The first customers arrived at 8:03. By 8:30, the cafe was at its normal morning capacity. By 9, Amara had served 42 people, maintained her composure through 2 conversations with regulars who had seen the online activity and wanted to express support. She thanked them, briefly, and redirected the conversation toward their orders, and managed the floor alone for 20 minutes when Marcus, who was supposed to be on at 9, texted to say he was 10 minutes out because he had been screen recording Vanessa's post-activity since 6 and had lost track of time. She was not angry about the 10 minutes. She was grateful for the 6 hours of documentation he had produced in the middle of the night because he gave a damn about what happened to this place. Her phone buzzed at 9:14 with a text from Patricia, "Seen the post. Documentation package from your corporate contact arrived. This is more than enough. Call me at 10. Amara put her phone in her back pocket and made a cortado for the woman at the end of the bar who came in every Tuesday and Thursday and always looked like she was running 15 minutes behind on a schedule that didn't forgive it. Patricia's voice at 10 o'clock had the particular quality it got when she had been working a problem since early morning and had arrived at conclusions she was satisfied with. "The post changes everything," Patricia said. "Before this, we had a documented pattern of anonymous, coordinated activity that we could link to her through language analysis and circumstantial evidence, strong enough for platform action, arguable in defamation. After this post, she assigned her name to a public statement that explicitly references prior knowledge of allegations she had a hand in manufacturing. Combined with the timeline documentation your contact provided, this is no longer a difficult case. Straightforward one." "What are the options?" Amara said. She was in the back room, door closed, the muffled sound of the cafe operating normally on the other side. 1. We file a formal defamation complaint against her personally. Civil. The documentation supports it. The post provides the public-facing statement, and the economic harm from the award period traffic drop gives us damages to quantify. This will become a legal matter that takes months, generates press, and puts you in the same story as her for the duration. Next option. 2. We do nothing legally, but publish the timeline, update the post, the timestamp, the connection to the prior anonymous campaign, and let the court of public opinion do what it's already beginning to do. She will experience professional consequences without you having to be in the room. She already deleted the post, Amara said. Marcus told me at 9:47. I know. We have complete documentation of it. Deletion doesn't undo the 712 shares it accumulated before she took it down. 712. As of 9:30, it's still circulating in screenshot form. Amara leaned against the wall of the back room. Third option, Patricia said. We send her a formal legal notice today, not a lawsuit, a notice. This is what we have. This is what it constitutes. This is what filing would look like. Give her 48 hours to respond with a signed written acknowledgement of the campaign and a public retraction. Amara was quiet. That third option, she said. What does the acknowledgement look like? She admits, in writing, to the coordinated posting campaign, the anonymous accounts, the insider group seeding, and the connection between all of it. The retraction is public, her platform, her name, explicit and clear. And if she doesn't respond in 48 hours, then we file, and the notice becomes part of the case. Amara looked at the wall. Send the notice, she said, today, before noon. I'll have it to her by 11:30, Patricia said. Good. She paused. Patricia, I want one more thing in the notice. Tell me. I want it made clear that the notice and everything we have was compiled with the assistance of Kang Pacific Holdings corporate investigation team. I want her to know the documentation is professional grade, not amateur. I want her to understand exactly what she's looking at. A brief pause on Patricia's end. That's a strategic choice, Patricia said. I know. It will tell her that you have resources she didn't account for when she started this. Yes, Amara said, it will. Another pause. Done, Patricia said. I'll add it to the notice header. At 11:07, Amara called Do-yun. He answered on the second ring. I'm using the documentation, she said, in the formal notice. I wanted you to know before it went out. All right, he said. I'm not asking for anything else from you. On this, I understand. She heard something in the line, not words, not silence exactly. The quality of a person who has more to say and is choosing to hold it. How are you? He said finally. She considered the question. Working, she said. Amara, I know, she said. I know we have a conversation to finish. I just need to get through today first. I'll be there, he said. When you're ready. She hung up. She went back out onto the floor. The notice arrived at Vanessa Cole's registered email address at 11:34, delivered simultaneously to the last known physical address she had, on public record, an apartment in the Belltown neighborhood, 12 minutes from Pioneer Square, and to the professional management company that handled her freelance digital consulting, because Patricia was thorough in the way that made her worth every dollar Amara had ever paid her. Amara knew none of this in real time. She was on the floor of the cafe, working the lunch transition, managing the equipment, watching Marcus run the register with the focused competence he always had when he understood the stakes were elevated. She learned about the delivery from Patricia's text at 11:42. She read it at 12:03, during the 3-minute gap between the lunch peak and the early afternoon quiet. Then, at 12:17, her phone rang with a number she did not recognize. She almost let it go to voicemail. Something made her answer. Amara. The voice was familiar as in the way that something preserved in a specific medium is familiar, from the right frequency, the right cadence, but processed through years of separation until it sounded like a recording of itself. It's me, Vanessa. Amara walked into the back room. She closed the door. She said nothing. I got the notice, Vanessa said. Her voice had the texture of someone who had not slept and had been crying and had stopped crying because there was nothing left in that direction. Your lawyer. I got it. I know you did, Amara said. Vanessa's voice broke on the syllable, and she pulled it back together with audible effort. I need to talk to you. You're talking to me. Not like this. Not I can't do this with a lawyer notice in my hand. Can we go, Amara said. Flat. Clean. The door that is technically still open, but that you should absolutely not mistake for an invitation. Amara, Vanessa, listen to me. Her voice was not raised. Did not need to be. It had the quality of something that had been under enormous sustained pressure for a long time and had not broken, which gave it a particular density that volume could not have achieved. You have 48 hours. That's what the notice says. At the end of 48 hours, either I have a written acknowledgement and a public retraction, or Patricia files. That's the whole conversation. I know what it says. Vanessa's voice cracked again, this time without pulling back together. I know what I did. I know how long She stopped, inhaled. I was jealous of you for years. I've been jealous of you since we were 22 years old, and you always had this thing, this way of just,
I know.
A breath.
I know.
That doesn't fix anything. No, Amara said. It doesn't. Silence on the line. I'm going to sign it, Vanessa said. The acknowledgement. Another broken breath. I needed you to know that I know what I did. Not to your business. To you. To the friendship. To her voice went thin. I've known for years. I just nop, Amara said. Vanessa stopped. Sign the acknowledgement, Amara said. Send it to Patricia before the 48 hours. Write the retraction and post it publicly. She paused. That's all I need from you. She hung up. She stood in the back room with her phone in her hand. Her hands were steady. Her breathing was even. She was holding herself together with the specific musculature that 5 years of building something alone had developed in her, the deep tissue competence that doesn't show on the surface, but that holds. Everything upright when the external supports are gone. She stood there for 30 seconds. Then she went back out to the floor and made a pour-over for the woman who always came in at 12:30 with her dog tied outsides and her laptop open before she had even sat down. Vanessa's signed acknowledgement arrived in Patricia's inbox at 4:57 that afternoon. Patricia forwarded it to Amara with a 2-sentence message, complete and explicit. She also sent a draft of the public retraction. I've reviewed it. It says what it needs to say. Your call on timing. Amara read the acknowledgement in the back room at 5:15, after the afternoon staff had come in and she had handed off the floor. It was 3 pages. Handwritten first, then typed. The handwritten version scanned and included as an attachment along with the typed version, as if Vanessa needed the physical act of the handwriting to make it real for herself. It acknowledged the coordinated campaign in specific detail, the timeline, the platforms, the anonymous accounts, the insider group seating. It acknowledged that the campaign had been initiated within 48 hours of a conversation with Derek Holloway in which he mentioned Amara's award nomination. It acknowledged that the motivation was, in Vanessa's own words, an inability to see Amara succeed after destroying what we had without ever facing what I'd done. Amara read it once. She put her phone in her pocket. She went back out and helped with the 5 o'clock push. 5:43, the television news van parked outside Juniper Ash. Amara had known it was coming. The Monday interview had been confirmed, and the producer had called that morning to mention they might want to do some B-roll footage in advance. But the van arriving in the middle of a Tuesday service was different from an anticipated Monday interview, and she felt the shift in the room the moment she saw it through the window. Britt appeared at her elbow. I know, Amara said. How do you want to handle it? Tell them to wait. 15 minutes. She looked at the floor for a moment, then looked up. And call Marcus in early. I don't want to be short-staffed for the camera. Already texted him, Britt said. Amara looked at her. You're very good at this, Amara said. Britt said I learned from someone. The producer was a woman named Sandra Cho, late 30s, efficient in the manner of someone who covered a lot of ground in a day and had learned to assess situations quickly. She shook Amara's hand at the cafe door and looked around the space with the professional eye of someone who was simultaneously seeing it as a person and calculating its camera angles. We were going to wait for Monday, Sandra said, but the post activity and the legal notice going out today. Our editor thinks the story has more momentum right now. I understand, Amara said. We'd like to do a brief on-camera statement today on the record. Not the full interview that's still Monday. Just your response to today's developments. One condition, Amara said. Sandra waited. You confirm on air that the platform review has been removed and the account has been suspended before you air my statement. I'm not responding to a story, I'm providing context to a resolution. Sandra looked at her. Something shifted in producer's expression. The specific micro-adjustment of someone who has been doing this long enough to recognize when they are dealing with a subject who understands how this works. Deal, Sandra said. They sat up in front of the counter, the cafe visible behind her, the late afternoon light falling through the east windows in the particular quality that had always made the space look its best. The camera operator took 3 minutes to position. Sandra stood off to the side. Amara looked at the lens. She was not nervous. Nervous was a thing she had run out of room for somewhere around year 2. In your own words, Sandra said, what happened here? Amara said, someone who knew me a long time ago watched me succeed and decided to try to take it from me. She used anonymous accounts and coordinated false reviews to manufacture doubt about a business I built from nothing over 5 years. She paused. She had a signed acknowledgement out by 5 o'clock today. The documentation that supported our case was compiled by my staff, my attorney, and the corporate investigation team of Kang Pacific Holdings, whose chairman has been a customer of Juniper and Ash for 2 years. She paused again. The truth moved faster than the lie. That's the story. Sandra said, in the business? Going forward? We open tomorrow at 7, Amara said. Same as every other day. The segment ran on the 6 o'clock news. Amara watched it on her phone in the back room. At 6:20, the sound low, Britt standing beside her. The segment was 4 minutes and 30 seconds. It confirmed the platform removal, the account suspension, and the legal notice. It showed the exterior of Juniper and Ash. It showed Amara's statement, unedited. It showed a brief clip of the Pioneer Square neighborhood at morning rush, people lined up outside the cafe door, the kind of visual that communicated, without needing to say it explicitly, that this was a place worth lining up for. It did not name Vanessa Cole. It did not need to. At 6:43, Vanessa Cole's public retraction appeared on her social media platform. It was posted under her full name. It was explicit. It said, the anonymous reviews and posts targeting Juniper and Ash over the past 4 months were initiated by me. They were false. The cafe's food safety record is exemplary. I manufactured doubt because I was not able to face my own history with the person who built that business. I am sorry for the harm I caused to her staff, and to her customers. Amara read it on her phone, standing at the back room doorway. She did not feel triumphant. She did not feel relieved. Not exactly. She felt the specific exhaustion of a person who has been running at maximum capacity for 11 days, and has now finally crossed a finish line they could not entirely see until they were past it. She put her phone in her pocket. She went back to the floor. Do-yun arrived at 7:15, 20 minutes before close. He did not come in through the front door. He texted from the street. I'm outside. Come when you're ready. I'll wait. She closed out the register at 7:32. She told Britt and Marcus they could go. She would finish the closing routine herself. They both looked at her with the particular expression of people who understood more than she had said and chose to honor the boundary of the unsaid. She locked the front door. She turned off the display lights. She went outside. Do-yun was standing on the sidewalk with his hands in his coat pockets. The Pioneer Square evening was cold, the kind of cold that came off the sound and settled into the stones of the old buildings. He was not, she noticed, flanked by anyone. He had come alone, the way he always came here, the way he had always treated this block of the city as a place where he did not need to be anything other than himself. She stood in front of him. She said, the acknowledgments came in before 5. Retraction went up at 6:43, segment ran at 6. I know, he said. I watched it. I used Kang Pacific's name in my on-camera statement, she said. I should have asked you first. You didn't need to ask, he said. She looked at him. The street was quiet around them. Car passed. Someone laughed somewhere above them, on a balcony she couldn't see. The city doing its evening business, indifferent and continuous. The night you told me what you were, she said. The other part of it. I've been thinking about it every day since. He waited. I need to know, she said. If that part of your life touches Micah. In any way, direct or indirect. No, he said. Immediate. Absolute. If I let you stay close to him, she said, and something from that world comes near him. It won't, he said. I would rather lose everything I've built than have that world come near him. She looked at him. She had learned over 2 years to read the difference between the thing these Do-yun said because they were useful and the things he said because they were true. She had learned it the slow way, through the accumulation of moments, through watching him choose the harder option when the easier one was available, through the way he spoke to Micah directly, without performance, without the condescension that adults deploy when they want children to feel seen without actually having to see them. She had not let herself name what she felt about him, because naming it felt like a risk she could not afford on top of all the other risks. She was naming it now, not out loud, but in the place inside herself where she had been keeping it, carefully covered for longer than she wanted to admit. "I need you to understand something," she said. "Tell me. I built everything I have by not needing anyone to save me," she said. "That's not something I'm going to change. Not for this. Not for anything. I know, but I also—" She stopped. Started again. "I have been alone in this for 6 years. And I'm tired. Not of the work. Not of Micah. Not of any of it." She looked at him. "Tired of doing it with nobody standing next to me." The cold air moved between them. Do-yun's jaw was tight. She could see the muscles in it working. She could see him holding very still, the way he held still when he was managing something significant and did not want the management to show. "I'm not going anywhere," he said, low, like something that had been waiting a long time to be said and was now finally out in the air where it had to be true. She nodded. She looked at the cafe door behind her, the window with the Juniper and Ash lettering, the light still on inside, the space she had built from nothing and defended from nothing, and would go on building long after tonight was over. She looked back at him. She said, "I have to go finish closing." "I know," he said. She turned. She had her hand on the door handle when he said quietly, "Amara." She stopped. She turned her head slightly. "Not all the way. Just enough. What you did this week," he said. "The way you did it. I want you to know." He stopped. She heard him finding the words. "I have spent 20 years believing that power was the only protection that mattered. You showed me that's not true. And I don't know yet what to do with that. But I needed you to know that I saw it." She stood with her hand on the door. The Pioneer Square night was cold and quiet around them. She said, "Go home, Do-yun. I'll see you tomorrow morning." She went inside. She finished the closing routine. She turned off the last light. She stood for a moment in the dark cafe, the street light coming through the windows, the familiar shapes of the tables and the counter, and the equipment she had maintained and repaired and replaced piece by piece over 5 years, the space that was hers in the most irreducible sense, not because she owned it on paper, but because she had given enough of herself to it that the two things had become genuinely inseparable. Then she picked up her bag and walked out into the night to get her son. And 2 blocks away, in a car she had not noticed parked on the cross street, a man she had never seen before was on the phone with someone who was not Do-yun, speaking in a low, rapid Korean that had the specific compressed urgency of a conversation that cannot afford to be overheard. And the thing he was saying, the thing he had been waiting 2 weeks to be able to say, was that the woman had made her move, the legal documents were on record, and the chairman's exposure was now wider than it had been before. Because his name was attached to a public investigation into a criminal harassment campaign. And that attachment, in the right hands, could be used to put pressure on Kang Pacific's Pacific Rim freight relationships in ways that the chairman had not planned for and that his enemies had been waiting a very long time to exploit. And the man on the other end of the phone said 3 words that the seated man wrote on a notepad in the dark of the car, tore off, and folded into his breast pocket like something he intended to use. 3 words. Move on Thursday. Amara did not know about the car. She did not know about the phone call. She did not know that the week she had spent fighting for her cafe, her name, and her right to tell her own story had inadvertently created the conditions for a threat of an entirely different magnitude, one that had nothing to do with a jealous woman and a consumer review platform, and everything to do with the invisible architecture of the world Do-yun had tried to protect her from by keeping it separate, an architecture that did not respect the separation, that had been watching the space between them close for 2 years, and had now decided that the woman who stood closest to Kang Do-yun was no longer a peripheral detail, but a pressure point, ascended Senyan, and that Thursday was the day someone intended to find out exactly how much she was worth to the most feared man in the room, and whether that worth could be converted into leverage that would make him. Wednesday passed without incident. That was the thing she would think about later, how ordinary Wednesday was. How she picked up Micah from school, and he had paint on his left elbow that he could not account for, and strong opinions about whether they should have rice or pasta for dinner. how she made pasta, how she helped him with the letter-tracing worksheet his teacher had sent home, sitting beside him at the kitchen table, watching him grip the pencil with the focused intensity of someone performing surgery, his tongue pressed between his teeth. How she read him 2 chapters of the book they had been working through together, the one about a boy and a fox and a winter that goes on too long, and how he fell asleep before the 2nd chapter ended, the way he sometimes did, suddenly and completely like a switch being thrown. How she sat on the edge of his bed afterward and looked at him. For a long moment, this child she had carried alone and delivered early and sat beside in a NICU chair for 17 days. This child, who said her name with the full confidence of someone who had never once doubted they were loved and felt the particular weight of having something worth protecting. She did not know about Thursday yet. She would find out at 6:12 in the morning, the same way she found out most things that changed the shape of her life, through a phone call she was not prepared for, while standing in a kitchen that smelled like coffee. Do-yun called, not his office, him. Direct line. The one she had never heard ring at 6 in the morning. She picked up on the 2nd ring. "Listen to me carefully," he said. She set down her coffee cup. His voice had a quality she had not heard in it before, not panic. Do-yun did not panic, but a compressed, absolute urgency, that's the texture of someone who has been awake since, before she was asleep and has spent those hours making decisions that cannot be reversed. "There are people who want to use your name against me," he said. "Not against you. Against me, through you." She said, "What people?" "Competitors. The freight corridor in Busan. There's a group that has wanted leverage over Kang Pacific's Pacific Rim contracts for 3 years. When my name went into your public statement this week, it gave them something they could use. Pressure point." He paused, measured. "They were going to approach you today. Not violently. An approach. A conversation you would not be able to walk away from without consequences either way." She gripped the counter with her free hand. "What kind of conversation?" she said. "The kind where they tell you what they know about what I am," he said. "And then they tell you what they want. And the wanting is that you tell them things about my schedule and my freight partners and my port contacts, things you do not actually have, but they do not know that yet, or they make what they know about my organization available to federal investigators who have been building a case against Kang Pacific for 2 years. Kitchen was very quiet. "Federal investigators," she said. "Yes. How long have they been building it?" A pause. 2 years, he said. The number dropped into the silence between them and did not disappear. 2 years. The same 2 years he had been sitting in her cafe. The same 2 years Micah had grown from a 3-year-old who said hello to a stranger to a 5-year-old who asked Do-yun to help with his reading. The same 2 years she had been allowing herself, incrementally and with enormous caution, to trust someone again. She did not speak. Amara, his voice had changed. Urgency was still there, but underneath it something had opened, something rawer, less controlled. "I need you to hear me say that I knew about the investigation before I told you about the organization. I knew, and I told you anyway, because I was not willing to keep being someone who stood next to you with that unsaid." She exhaled slowly. "Where are these people now?" she said. "Handled," he said. "What does that mean?" "It means they will not approach you. Not today, not after today." He paused. "I need you to know that when I say handled, I mean they were intercepted before they got near you or Micah. Nothing happened to them that can't be walked back. I need you to know that." "I believe you," she said. The words came out before she had consciously formed the decision to say them. And then they were said, and she felt the truth of them, not easy, not uncomplicated, but real. She did believe him, not because the situation was clean, or because the implications of the last 4 minutes were anything less than significant. Because she had watched this man for 2 years and had learned, the slow way, that there was a line in him between what he was capable of and what he chose to do with that capability, and that the line was real, and he held it. "Do-yun," she said. "Yes. I need you to sit down with me today," she said. "Not here, not the cafe. Somewhere we can talk for a long time without interruption." "Tell me where," he said. "I'll text you," she said, "after I drop Micah at school." She hung up. She stood in the kitchen. The coffee she had set down was still warm. She picked it up and drank it without tasting it, looking out the window at the early morning light on the building across the alley. the ordinary gray and white of a Seattle October morning, going about its business with complete indifference to the fact that her life had just pivoted on its axis again. She finished the coffee. She went to wake Micah. He wanted waffles. She made waffles. He told her something complicated had happened at school, involving a disagreement over whose turn it was to feed the classroom fish. A sound injustice of the situation was still apparently acute because he described it with the full moral weight of someone who had given the matter significant overnight consideration. She listened. She validated that it sounded unfair. She asked what he thought should happen next. He said there should be a schedule. She said that sounded like a reasonable solution, and that he should suggest it to his teacher. Nodded satisfied. He ate his waffles. She dropped him at school at 7:50. He ran inside without looking back. She texted Do-yun the name of a restaurant in Eastlake, midpoint between Pioneer Square and the address she associated with his office. A place she knew because she had eaten there, alone a dozen times over the years. On the early evenings when she needed to be somewhere that wasn't her apartment and wasn't the cafe, when she needed the specific comfort of being in a room full of people while not being required to interact with any of them. It was quiet in the mornings. Good coffee, tables far enough apart that a conversation could happen without being heard. He was there when she arrived. He had ordered coffee for both of them, sat down across from him, and looked at him the way she looked at things she needed to fully seize before she acted on what she saw. He looked, for the first time since she had known him, like a man who was tired. Not physically, he was composed, as always, impeccably so. But there was something behind the composure that had shifted. Something that had been held in position by considerable effort and was no longer being held there. "Tell me everything," she said. "From the beginning. Not the version you told me in the cafe. All of it," he told her. It took 47 minutes. She did not interrupt. He told her about the organization, its structure, its reach, the specific nature of the relationships between Kang Pacific's legitimate freight operations and the informal networks that had grown alongside them for 15 years, the way the two things had been designed to be inseparable so that dismantling one would threaten the other. He told her about the federal investigation, what they had, how long they had been building it, the specific agents involved, and what they were looking for. He told her about the conversation he had been having with his legal team for 6 months, about the possibility of cooperation, about what that would cost and what it would change, and whether the thing that came out on the other side would be recognizable as the thing that went in. He told her about the Wednesday evening 2 weeks earlier when he had sat in his office after leaving her cafe and made a decision that he had been approaching for months and had finally arrived at, that he was going to begin dismantling the criminal infrastructure of Kang Pacific systematically and completely, regardless of the cost to the organization's reach and influence. A sound like green wood, a week, because he had watched a woman, something she built with her bare hands, using nothing but the truth, and he could not continue to be something that the truth could not survive contact with. When he was done, the coffee cups were empty. The restaurant had filled around them, and they had not noticed. Amara looked at the table for a moment. Then she looked at him. "The federal investigators," she said. "If you cooperate, what does that look like for you?" "Complicated," he said. "Long. There will be financial restructuring. There will be contracts that dissolve and partnerships that end. There will be a period during which Kang Pacific is significantly smaller than it is now." He paused. "There will be a period during which I am significantly less powerful than I am now. And the people who came for me this morning," she said, "they're from the network. The part you're dismantling. Yes, they'll come again," she said. "If not me, then something else. Someone else connected to you." "Yes," he said, "until the cooperation is complete and the network understands the landscape has changed. That will take time." She looked at him. "I have a 5-year-old, she said. "I know. I have a business in Pioneer Square that I built from nothing and that I am not going to let become a liability because of who I'm connected to." "I know that too," he said. "So what do you need from me?" she said. "Practically. What does the next period of this look like if I'm in it?" Something moved in his face. The specific quality of a man who has prepared for many responses and has not prepared for this one, not rejection, not ultimatum, but this, a practical question that presupposes she is staying and wants to understand the terrain. I need you to not be visible, he said. For a period. Not invisible, that's not possible, and I wouldn't ask it. But not publicly connected to me in ways that give the network access to you. No statements with my name attached. No shared presence that gives someone a line to pull. He paused. Micah stays completely clear. That's not negotiable for me, regardless of anything else. How long is the period, she said. My legal team says 8 to 14 months for the cooperation to reach the point where the network accepts the restructuring is real. She nodded slowly. She looked out the window. The Eastlake Street was doing its mid-morning thing dog walkers. A cyclist, a delivery van, double parked and blocking half the lane with the supreme confidence of a vehicle that does this daily and has stopped feeling bad about it. She looked back at Do-yun. I'm going to say something, she said, and I need you to hear it without responding right away. He waited. I spent 6 years making sure I never needed anyone enough that losing them would break something essential, she said. I did that on purpose. I did it because the last time I trusted someone that completely, I was standing in a doorway holding 2 cups of coffee that nobody wanted. She paused. I'm not that person anymore. I am also not going to stop being the person who built everything I have without needing to be saved. Those 2 things are both true simultaneously. I know, he said. I'm not asking you to save me, she said. I'm telling you that I choose to be next to you. That's different. And the difference matters to me. It matters to me too, he said quietly. She reached across the table. She picked up his empty coffee cup, looked at it, set it back down. A small, ordinary gesture that was not small or ordinary in the context of everything they had just said. Okay, she said. He looked at her. Okay, she said again. Let's figure out what the next 8 months look like. She called Patricia from the car outside the restaurant. She explained the federal investigation in the terms she understood. She explained the cooperation process Do-yun's legal team was navigating. She asked Patricia what she needed to do to ensure that Juniper and Ash and Micah's financial structures were clean and clearly separate from anything Kang Pacific related. Patricia listened, without interrupting, always a sign that she was taking the situation seriously. You're not legally exposed, Patricia said. You've taken no money from him, had no business relationship, no shared financial instruments. Cafe is clean. Micah's accounts are clean. Your consulting work has no Kang Pacific involvement. I want that documented, Amara said, affirmatively. I want it clear that if any investigator ever looks at me, they find a wall of clean documentation that takes them 2 minutes to review and set aside. I'll have a financial structure certification, prepared by end of week, Patricia said. It will be thorough. Thank you, Amara said. Amara. Patricia's voice shifted slightly. Not softer, exactly. Patricia did not do soft, but more direct. You understand what you're choosing? Yes, Amara said. The next period will be difficult. The last 6 years have been difficult, Amara said. I know what difficult looks like. A brief silence. All right, Patricia said. End of week for the documentation. Derek called that afternoon. She was back at the cafe, managing the afternoon service, when his name appeared on her screen. She stepped into the back and answered. I saw the news segment, he said. From last night. Okay, she said. You looked, he stopped. Started differently. It worked. What you did. The way you handled it. Yes, she said. A pause. I keep thinking about what you told me, he said. The other night. About Micah. She waited. His voice was unsteady in the way she had heard it once before, years ago in a different hallway. I don't know what to ask for. I don't know if I have the right to ask for anything. You don't have a right, she said. But that's not the same as there being nothing possible. He was quiet. He doesn't know about you, she said. He's 5. He knows he has a mom and that his mom works very hard and loves him. He doesn't have questions yet that require answers about you. She paused. When he does, I'll tell him the truth in the way that a 5-year-old, and then a 6-year-old, and then whatever age he is, can understand it. And me? Derek said. If you want to be someone he can know, she said, that starts with you being consistent. Not with me, with him. You show up when you say you will. You don't disappear. You understand that any access you have to him exists because it serves him, not because it costs me anything to give it. She paused. Those are the terms. They're not negotiable. I understand, he said. I know you feel guilty, she said. I'm not going to manage your guilt for you. That's yours. I know. Call me in 2 weeks, she said. If you're still thinking about it in 2 weeks, we'll talk about what a first step looks like. She hung up. She stood in the back room. She thought about Derek, and she thought about Vanessa, and she thought about the bedroom doorway 6 years ago, and the 2 cups of coffee and the engagement ring she had placed on the kitchen counter, and the decision she had made that night alone in a silent apartment, looking at a photograph on a shelf, about what kind of person she was going to be on the other side of what had just happened to her. She had kept that decision, not easily, not without cost, not without the specific loneliness of nights when the apartment was quiet and Micah was asleep, and the weight of having built everything herself pressed on her chest, with the particular heaviness of something that is both your greatest achievement and your most sustained sacrifice. But she had kept it, and the thing she had built, all of it, the cafe and the reputation and the financial footing and the relationship with her son that was the most honest thing in her life, was real in the way that things built without shortcuts and without compromise are real, structurally sound, hers. She went back out to the floor. 2 weeks later, on a Tuesday afternoon, Vanessa Cole's management company announced she would be taking an indefinite leave from her consulting practice. Amara read the announcement on her phone during a break and felt nothing she could name as satisfaction. What she felt was more like the specific quiet that follows a sustained noise. Not relief, exactly, but the absence of something that had been present. For so long, she had stopped registering it as a separate thing. She put her phone in her pocket. She made a cortado for the man at the end of the bar. The letter from Vanessa arrived on a Thursday, 3 weeks after the retraction. Handwritten. 5 pages. The handwriting was the same as she remembered. Vanessa had always had very specific handwriting, the kind that looks like it was taught by someone who cared about penmanship, but the pressure of it was different, harder, like someone who had written and rewritten until the words were finally what they were supposed to be. Amara read it at the kitchen table after Micah was in bed. The letter said a lot of things. It said that Vanessa had been jealous of Amara since they were 22 years old. Not because Amara had more or did more, but because Amara had always seemed to know who she was in a way that Vanessa had spent decades trying to manufacture and never successfully felt. It said that sleeping with Derek had not been about Derek. It said that destroying something Amara had made was the most shameful thing she had ever done, and that she had known it was shameful while she was doing it, which was perhaps the most honest thing in the entire letter. It said she was not asking for anything. It said she did not expect forgiveness and was not asking for it. A sound like sin. It said she hoped that someday Amara believed that the jealousy had never been about hate, which was a distinction that Vanessa understood might mean nothing to the person who had been on the receiving end of what it produced. Amara read it twice. She sat with it for a long time. Then she folded it and put it in the kitchen drawer. Not forgiven. Finished. Those were different things. She was clear on the difference. Forgiveness was for Vanessa's benefit, and Vanessa had forfeited the standing to ask for it. Finished meant that Amara was not going to carry the weight of that specific, unresolved thing anymore. Finished meant she was setting it down, not handing it back, not burning it, just setting it in a drawer and walking away from the drawer. She had enough to carry that was worth carrying. 8 months later, Kang Pacific Holdings announced a significant corporate restructuring. The press release was measured, careful, the language of institutional transformation rather than exposure. Several freight corridor partnerships were renegotiated. 2 subsidiary operations were dissolved. The company's Pacific Rim logistics contracts were consolidated around a smaller, cleaner network of verifiable partners. The announcement mentioned a commitment to full regulatory compliance across all operations and the appointment of an independent ethics oversight board. What the press release did not mention was what had preceded it. The cooperation, the 18 months of legal navigation, the specific cost to Do-yun personally of dismantling infrastructure that had taken 15 years to build. What it cost him in influence, in relationships, in the particular kind of power that does not appear in any official filing and cannot be restored by corporate restructuring once you have chosen to walk away from it. Amara read the announcement on her phone at the cafe counter between the morning rush and the mid-morning quiet. She texted him, saw it. He texted back. 20 minutes later, "How's Micah's reading?" She smiled at her phone. She put it in her pocket. She went back to work. On a Friday evening in late October, almost exactly a year after the week that had changed everything, Juniper and Ash was full. Not unusually full, in the way it was full. Most Friday evenings now, the regular rhythm of a neighborhood place that people had decided was worth returning to. The light was the late afternoon light that had always made the space look its best. A sound through the east splitting, coming through the east windows at the angle that caught the wood of the counter and made it glow in the specific way that Amara had noticed on the very first morning she unlocked the door. 6 years ago, and that still stopped her. Sometimes when she came in from the back and the angle was right. Micah was at his corner table. He had his reading assignment spread out in front of him, a worksheet, a picture book. A sound like green wood splitting a pencil that he kept putting down and picking up in the specific rhythm of someone working through something that requires more effort than they want to admit it requires. He was 6 now. He had opinions about breakfast geometry and fish feeding schedules and the correct moral framework for disputes about playground equipment, and he read with the focused, slightly labored attention of a child for whom reading was becoming real in the way that things become real when you stop performing them and start actually doing them. Do-yun was sitting across from him. He was not helping, exactly. He was present in the way that he was present with Micah, fully, without the performance of engagement. He was watching Micah work and saying nothing, which was precisely what Micah needed, which Do-yun had understood without being told. Micah got stuck on a word. He said it out loud wrong, and then looked at Do-yun. Do-yun looked at the word. "Break it up," he said. "First part." Micah looked at the page, said the first part. "Second part," Do-yun said. Micah said the second part. "Put them together," Do-yun said. Micah put them together. "Perseverance," he said slowly. Then again, with the satisfaction of a person who has just unlocked something that was locked. "Perseverance." "That's it," Do-yun said. Micah looked at him. "What does it mean?" Do-yun was quiet for a moment. "It means you keep going," he said, "even when it's hard, especially then." Micah nodded. He looked at the word on the page again. He wrote it in the blank on his worksheet, slowly and carefully, with the full pressure of a pressured child who understands that some words are worth getting right. Amara was behind the counter. She had been watching. She did not pretend. There was no one to pretend for. And she had given up performing composure for herself a long time ago. She looked at her son at the corner table and the man across from him, and she let herself feel it without immediately managing it. The specific complexity of what she felt, the gratitude, and the wariness, and the love she had been careful with, and the knowledge that careful was not the same as absent. She felt all of it, and she did not look away from it, and she did not reduce it to something simpler than it was. Britt appeared at her elbow. "Table 4 needs a refill," Britt said, and then glanced in the direction Amara was looking and said nothing else. Amara picked up the carafe. She went to table 4. She refilled the coffee for the 2 women who came in every Friday and always ordered the same thing, and always stayed until the light changed. She had splitting, and she exchanged a few words with them in the comfortable shorthand of people who have been regulars long enough to have a shorthand, and she moved back to the counter and continued the work of the evening with the specific combination of competence and presence that had always been her best professional quality. 7:15, she closed out the register. At 7:25, she thanked Marcus and the evening staff and sent them home. 7:30, she turned off the display lights and began the closing routine. Micah packed up his school things with the comprehensive inefficiency of a 6-year-old, which is to say that the pencil went in the wrong pocket of his bag and had to be relocated. A sound like the worksheet pages went briefly missing and was found under his chair, and the picture book had to be retrieved from where it had migrated to the empty chair beside him over the course of the evening. Do-yun helped him with his jacket. Amara watched from behind the counter, wiping down the espresso machine, and thought about the bedroom doorway 6 years ago. She let herself think about it directly, the way she had learned to think about the hard things, not flinching, not dwelling, just looking at it clearly for a moment before setting it down again. The doorway, and the 2 cold cups of coffee, and the decision she had made alone in the silent apartment afterward. The decision that had cost her everything she had planned for and given her everything she had. She set down the cloth. She came around from behind the counter. "Ready?" she said. Micah said yes with the full authority of someone who had finished his homework and earned the evening. Do-yun looked at her. She looked at him. There were things still unresolved between them. There would always be things still unresolved, because that was the nature of choosing someone rather than finding them perfect. The ongoing work of two people with complicated histories deciding, again and again, that the work was worth it. She knew that. She was not looking for resolution. She was looking at the actual thing with clear eyes and deciding that the actual thing was worth standing next to. She picked up her bag. She turned off the last light. She held the door for Micah, who went through it with the energy of a child who does not yet know how to leave a room without filling it on the way out. She followed him. Do-yun came last, and he pulled the door closed behind him and waited while she locked it, the particular sound of that lock. The two-turn tumbler she had replaced twice in 6 years, familiar to her, the way certain sounds become familiar, when they mark the end of something worth having done. Rare evening was cold and clear, the kind of October night when the city feels more solid than usual, the old stone of the buildings dense with stored chill, the streetlights bringing everything into sharp relief. Micah walked ahead of them on the sidewalk, his backpack bouncing, narrating something under his breath that was audible in fragments, something about the word he had learned and its application to the fish-feeding dispute, which apparently had been resolved in his favor through the implementation of the schedule he had proposed, a fact he seemed to find deeply satisfying from a philosophical standpoint. Amara listened to him. Do-yun walked beside her. They were not holding hands. They did not need to. There was a proximity between them that did not require physical contact to be real, the specific closeness of two people who have chosen each other with full knowledge of the cost and have decided the cost is something they can pay. She had almost nothing 6 years ago. A pregnancy she was keeping alone and a life that had just been dismantled and a stubborn, unreasonable insistence on building something that nobody could take from her. She had built it. It had been taken at more than once, and she had stood in front of it every time, with the documentation in her hand and the truth on her side and the specific kind of strength that is not impressive to look at from the outside, not dramatic, not righteous, not perform, just the slow, grinding, daily commitment to showing up for the thing you have decided is worth showing up for. She had not arrived at easy. She had arrived at real. Micah stopped on the corner and turned around. "Mom," he said. Do-yun said perseverance means you keep going, especially when it's hard. He considered this. "Is that what you do at the cafe?" She looked at her son. 6 years old, backpack on, the streetlight making his face very clear. "Every day," she said. He nodded, satisfied, the way he was satisfied when the world confirmed something he had already suspected. He turned back around and continued walking. Amara watched him for a moment. Then she looked up at the Pioneer Square sky, the narrow corridor of it, between the old buildings, the stars not quite visible through the city light, but present somewhere above it, and she breathed in the cold air and breathed it out, and she was not rebuilding. She had arrived. And the woman who had stood in a doorway, holding 2 cups of coffee that nobody wanted, who had sat alone in a silent apartment deciding what kind of person she was going to be, that woman would have recognized this moment, not as the end of the hard thing, but as the proof that the hard thing had been worth doing. Micah was half a block ahead now, still narrating. She lengthened her stride. She caught up.